Good morning, Kensington. Let's go ahead and stand as we worship and celebrate Jesus this morning. Sing the reign of darkness.
The reign of darkness now has ended in the kingdom of light, in the kingdom of light. Forever under your dominion, you're the king of my life. You're the king of my life. Sing, you reign. You reign above it all. You reign above it all. Over the universe and over every heart, there is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. Cross, the work was finished. God, you poured out your life just to give us new life. Now from the lips of the forgiven, hear an anthem arise. Is Jesus your life? Oh, you reign above it all. You reign above it all. Over the universe and over every heart, there is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. Let all of heaven and the earth erupt in song. We sing hallelujah to the everlasting one. There is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. Oh, you reign above it all. So you sent the darkness running out of an empty grave. Come on, you sing it. Seated alone. Yeah. You sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. Yeah, come on. You sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. Oh, you sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. Oh, you sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. Oh, you sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. You reign above it all. You reign above it all. Over the universe and over every heart, there is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. Let all of heaven and the earth erupt in song. Sing hallelujah. Sing hallelujah to the everlasting one. There is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. You reign above it all. Yes, you reign above it all. Come on, you sing. Sing, you reign above it all. You reign above it all. Just you, come on. There is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all.
Yeah. King Jesus, we just thank you so much for the opportunity opportunity to come together, for the opportunity to come together and worship you, and just to lift you up and glorify you. For everything that you've done and all of who you are. We love you. Receive our worship this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, y'all, go ahead and have a seat.
Good morning, Orion.
Good morning. That was beautiful, you guys.
It
by the way.
was
Thank
absolutely
you.
gorgeous.
Thank you.
Absolutely gorgeous.
It's amazing.
I want a little more energy here, though.
All right,
Good
let's
morning,
go.
Orion.
Good morning.
Here it is.
You know,
there it
I
is.
think they're really bummed that they had to wait so long to get in.
I know, parking
Are you guys
lot.
kind of like, okay, we're working on it. It's the snow.
Yeah.
It took a bunch of our spots.
It really did. But it's a fantastic problem that all of you
It
are here.
really
We're
is.
thrilled. Absolutely
is.
thrilled. So what's going on around this place,
We're very glad to
Suze?
see you, by the way. You're looking great this morning. All right, we have a couple quick things. Save the date for our women's retreat. It's going to be on May 19th. It is formerly known as Smash. How many of you have gone? All right, you know it's great. It's filled with just a bunch of opportunity for community, spiritual growth, and really bad food. But you can bring your own food, so it's absolutely fine. And in addition to that, we have our wild game dinner on tax day, April 15th. How many of you have ever been to that? All right, seriously, I have been. I won a fishing pole.
And it was good food, right?
It's unbelievable.
See, that has really
food.
good food.
It's more about the fishing pole, though, because
Okay.
the tags are still on it.
I see.
Who needs it, by the way? First come, first serve. You can have my fishing pole. There's lots of great prizes.
Hey,
is my
who's
point.
speaking at the wild game dinner, Susan?
Well, I don't know. Some guy named Craig McGlasson.
Mick something.
Somebody. I think he's like okay.
Yeah, I've heard good things.
I don't know.
I think it'll be good.
That much about him. But anyway, definitely want you to check out the wild game dinner. What else, Kim?
All kinds of stuff. So do you guys like Susan and I's t-shirts? Do we look good in orange? Like, who wears it better? I mean, you don't really have to vote, but you could vote for me if you wanted to. No, I'm teasing. So Susan and I have the amazing privilege to lead some of our guest service teams here at the Orion campus. So guest service teams are pretty much everything that happens in the lobby. So our usher greeters, our amazing traffic team that is out there right now, still probably parking people, the prayer team, the security team, the medical team, there's a hospitality team. There are so many things that happen in and through this building. So, you know what? I'm going to call some of you out right now. The hub team, which are the people who get to wear these snazzy orange shirts. So if you are on one of our guest service teams, would you stand up for a hot second? Come on. I know.
Don't be shy. We see you. We
Usher
know who you are.
greeters, medical Deborah. I see you right there. Come on, everybody,
Yep.
everybody. Where are they? I see them.
Pretty great.
Some security. And then our ushers are actually doing their thing right now. But sweet Deborah, who just stood up over here, she is part of our hospitality team. There is an amazing team of people who cooks breakfast for all of the arts and production team that is here super early, the staff and volunteers that are here all day. Deborah made the most amazing food this morning. I had a carrot cake French toast casserole. What?
It was good.
Did you know that's a thing? It was fantastic. But what we want to do is invite you into community on one of these teams. So if you haven't connected around this place and you're thinking what might be your first step, a lot of people's first step is jumping into a serving team. And I would love to meet you. You can scan the code that is right there. You can text that number. All of that will come directly to me, and I will be in touch with you this week. Or if you want to chat in person, I'll be out at the hub after service. Other people in these fantastic orange shirts will be out there too. But we would really love to help you find your place in community here at the Orion campus.
And you may have noticed we don't call it volunteering anymore because it really is about serving. And it's an incredible opportunity to kind of get beyond ourselves, make ourselves available so that somebody can drop their kids off, somebody gets a greeting at the door. The people who serve here get to actually have a good breakfast. It's really about others. So I would love for you to really prayerfully consider stepping onto that team. And last week for K-Kids, we got like 22 people. So it's a bit of a competition.
Yeah,
Kim.
Ryan and I are in a competition. He got 20, so I need more than 20 people.
22.
Okay, that's all I'm going to say.
You need more
no
than
pressure.
22.
More than 22?
And a half people.
Okay, I think we can do it,
All right,
though.
we have one more thing to announce. This coming Friday, we are going to have what's called Breakaway Takeover. How many of you have been a part of Takeover? No, you don't remember. It's pretty amazing. So this group, the Breakaway, this year, the Breakaway kids are going to meet here on Friday night, hear a great message, do some worship, and jump on a bus, head down to Kalahari, swim all night long, hop back on the bus, come back here in the morning to be picked up. And I will tell you, all 4 of my kids did these all-nighters. It wasn't fun for a couple days, but it was the most invitational event that we do. It's a great opportunity for them to invite their friends to something that they may never, ever have a chance to do. So please consider that. I think it's the best time. And if you want to volunteer, you're welcome, seriously. If you don't sleep, why not?
Yeah, I
think
love
it's
it.
a great idea.
Pray for all those leaders and those students, actually. All right, Craig's got some more information for us with everything that's going around here, so he's going to come on up, and we're so glad you guys are with us.
See ya.
My kids want to know why it's not fun for a few days after Kalahari, and I just told them, because you're horrible human beings for a few days afterwards. You're like, it's just not fun for us. I'm glad you have a great time, but you, hey, good morning. All right, gonna be one of those kind of mornings? Okay, good. So one really quick thing I just want to let you know about that is a really big thing for us. If you've been with us any length of time, you know we have been in a search to replace our founding pastor, Steve Andrews, who stepped aside from his role as the lead of all of Kensington. If you do not know, we have 6 campuses in different locations, 5 downstate, 1 up in Traverse City. And we have been without a lead pastor or senior pastor over the whole thing for a little bit of time now. We've had a couple people stepping in as interim to kind of help get us through that season of transition while we've been looking for a new person to fill that role. And if you're on our email list, you probably already know this. Hopefully you read it. But we have the elder board here, a candidate that we want to put forth in front of the entire church in a couple of weeks. Give you the chance to meet him. His name is Brian Mowry. Meet his wife, Becca. So we can put this on the screen. Here's how we're going to do this. At our Troy campus on the 15th, there's going to be one gathering. So we've been on we've been on a heck of a journey with this one, have we not? And when we did this last time, there was chance to do this at all of our campuses. That is not happening this time. We're picking one location, the most central campus that we have, which is Troy, and inviting everybody out on the 15th at 7 o'clock. So this will be an opportunity to meet Brian in person, meet his wife, Becca, hear a little bit of his heart. He's going to be speaking that evening, a little bit of Q&A. So also a chance for you to bring some of your questions that evening. So it will be a night that you're going to want to be at. So would encourage you highly, if you have any interest in this, where Kensington's headed in the future, who we are, how we're going about filling this role, and who this person is that we're putting forward, this is the night to come and to see all that. Now, let me clear up one very quick thing, because in all of the correspondence we have sent out in the last couple of months, emails and stuff we post online and meetings we've had, I have been inundated, literally up until the first service even, it happened again, with questions like, why are you leaving, Craig? Where are you going? Are you retiring? Somebody asked me that this morning while I was getting my tea in the lobby. Are you retiring or going to another church? I was like, what? I'm starting to get a complex. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. This is my place, and for better or for, that's not a clapping moment, it's a clarification moment. I'm just saying, thank you. I'm just saying, just for clarity's sake, I'm not going anywhere. This is not a replacement of any of our campus leaders. We have an incredible community, an incredible team of leaders around here from campus to campus. This is for the role over all of that, to create collaboration, to create unity, create clarity as all 6 campuses are running together to the same end of the same mission. So this is a big night for the person that we believe is the person to step into that role. So the 15th at our Troy campus, 7 o'clock, you're going to want to be there for that and to meet him. So here's what I'd love you to do before we go into the rest of the morning and we wrap up the series we have been in. Just take a minute, get your feet, stretch it out for a second, and turn to somebody next to you, because we all had to deal with that wicked snow that nobody wanted anymore. We were all done with it, and it came anyways. So tell somebody next to you as you say good morning, whether you used a blower or a shovel.
It is well with my soul. Words often veiled in the midst of chaos, in the midst of pain. It is well with my soul. A hymn written by a man named Horatio Spafford, a successful lawyer and businessman who lived in Chicago with his wife Anna and their 4 daughters. In 1871, tragedy struck when the Great Chicago Fire destroyed much of the city, including all of Spafford's real estate holdings. 2 years later, in what's known as the Panic of 1873, the economy crashed and caused his family even more financial hardship. That same year, to lighten the family's spirit, Spafford sent his family overseas for a vacation after his wife had recovered from an illness. He sent his wife and 4 daughters ahead on a ship across the Atlantic Ocean, planning to join them later. However, during their voyage halfway across the Atlantic, the ship collided with another vessel and sank to the bottom of the ocean. Horatio's wife, Anna, later sent a telegram to tell Horatio about the news. It contained these 2 words: saved alone. In the crash, 226 people were killed, including all 4 of Spafford's daughters. Upon hearing the tragic news, Spafford immediately set sail for Europe to be with his grieving wife. He spent many hours on the bow of that ship, staring at the waters that claimed the lives of his beloved daughters. As the ship had slowly approached the spot where his daughters had perished, Spafford wrote these words: "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul."
grew up in a small Baptist church. Yeah. Sang that song growing up all the time out of a hymnal. Anybody else? And told first service, I'm pretty sure if Kaylee would have been there singing it, I would have liked church a lot more growing up. But I didn't know the story behind that song until probably about 10 years ago. Anybody else just learned the story behind that song? You watched that video a minute ago? So I want you to put yourself for just a minute, like mentally, just put yourself in Spafford's shoes. Like, this is a very real man that went through a lot of loss, thought he was gonna find some respite, sends his family on vacation, and then loses all of his daughters. And imagine being on that boat and you're traveling across the open ocean. Like, if it was me, there's probably points where I'm asking, like, was it here? No, not yet. We'll let you know when we get there. Is it here? Like, I wanna know. And then imagine the moment where somebody had to tell him, hey, it was right here. Your girls are probably below us. And what he musters up in that moment of all that a human being could was to sit down and pen those words. Sit in them for a minute, would you? When peace like a river attendeth my way, and sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. And then he makes this sort of plea. He says, so Lord, haste the day when my faith will become sight. Like, I want to see it, not just have faith in it. So that, this is what he says, the clouds will be rolled back. But it is well with my soul. How many of you know that it can be not well with your circumstances and be still well with your soul? Because your soul can be pinned to something more sustainable and more firm and more secure than any of your circumstances. That's why, even though he sings about the billowing waves and the reality of what overtook his daughters, he also sings about the reality of what overtook creation, which was, my sin is nailed to the cross and I bear it no more. He's singing about a reality that is even truer than his loss, which is what gives him the ability to say, it is well with my soul, even when it's not well with my circumstances. So we're gonna wrap this series up that we've been in for the last couple of weeks. And if you're just joining us, cannot encourage you more than I can right now to go back at some point and listen to the last couple of weeks. We have camped in one book in the Bible in the Old Testament called Habakkuk. It's 3 short chapters. Today we're gonna hit chapter 3, and we've been walking with a man named Habakkuk who has really been bringing this emotion to God. God, it is not well in the land. It is not well in my life. I don't see well things on the horizon. So where are you and what are you doing? I have to imagine that before Spafford got to that point in the ocean where he wrote those words, he had other words with God. He had other wrestling moments with God. He had some probably words and wrestle well beyond those moments, but in that moment, he was able to muster that up, I think in part because he did the work to wrestle with God for all of the pain that he was living through. And that's what Habakkuk has been walking us through in the last couple of weeks. So before we dive in and wrap this whole thing up, let me just ask God to speak to us and be the voice that we can all hear today. Father in heaven, I am just so always mindful at this spot on a Sunday morning of your truth in the scriptures, that you are King and Lord over all things. You are the one that all heaven and earth derives its name by. And that one day, whether we have done it on our own here or not, one day every single knee is gonna bow before you and declare you as Lord. And so I just bow now and declare you as Lord. Over all things, over the good moments, over the broken moments, over the joyful moments, over the painful moments, declare you as Lord over the moments where you make sense and the moments where you don't. The moments where you function like I think you should and the moments where you do the opposite. And God, I pray that as we wrap up this series this morning, that you would help from so many years back across time, you would help Habakkuk to continue to speak to us. Ultimately, really, God, that you'd speak to us, that you'd use his life, you'd use his wrestle, you'd use his questions, and you would even use his hope to give us all of that as well. the ability to question, the ability to wrestle, and the ability to have hope. That people like Horatio Spafford wouldn't just be a hymn, wouldn't just be a song, but would be to us an example. And so God, I pray that you would have our hearts right now. You'd have our ears. Whether we're sitting here right now convinced you exist, or whether we're sitting here and we're really not certain if there's a you, or if there is a God, that you're him, Jesus. But I believe this, there is a God. Lord Jesus, you are him. And your message to us is that you have made a way for us to know you, and you are wildly, wildly passionate about us. Would that come through today? Even would it cut through, maybe for some of us, the pain or the frustration of things that we're living through at the moment, that you are Jesus, that you are Lord of all things, and that you are for us. In your name, amen. All right, hey, before we do go to the text this morning, which if you have a Bible, go ahead and grab it. We're going to be in the 3rd chapter of the book of Habakkuk in the Old Testament. We're going to go ahead and take up our offering too this morning. And just, as always, every time, thank you so much. This is one of the most committed places I've ever been a part of as a church that really doesn't believe that church begins and ends in the walls of a building. That's such a small part of it. And so we get out and we go and we serve and we love and we put our money where our mouth is, of being people that say we believe there's a God that loves them and wants to care for them. And we do that because of you. So the buckets are coming down. You're already seeing them. If you're the first row to grab it, just pass it behind you, pass it back, set it on the ground, and people will pick them up. Or if you're not doing the bucket thing, we've got plenty of ways online. So thank you so much for your generosity, Kensington. There's no Kensington without you. You're Kensington, and we're getting this done together. So, all right, let's jump in. Habakkuk chapter 3, keep your finger there. We're going to turn to the text in just a moment. 1985, I'm going to give you a story real quick of 2 climbers. 2 young climbers, young friends. Simon Yates, 22 years old, Joe Simpson, 25. Both of them were decent climbers, but were still developing their climbing history and also developing their friendship as climbers. So they decided that part of their new budding friendship would be solidified by taking on one of the most difficult climbs that they had ever done together. Actually, at this point, it would be the most difficult climb that they had ever done at all, let alone together. The Sulu Grande, which is in Peru, is about 20,000 feet high. Here's a picture of it. So this is what they decided they were going to climb. Now, at 20,000 feet high, if you know the mountaineering world at all, you know that there are plenty of mountains that are a lot higher. For example, Everest, that we've been looking at this whole series, 29,000 feet. So this is by no means the highest mountain that you can climb. However, here's part of what makes the Sulu Grande unique and interesting, is it is in a collection of 5 different mountains that make up the most deadly mountains to climb in the entire world. For a number of reasons, one of which being that the Sulu Grande has a west side, which is almost impassable. Matter of fact, up to this point of the climb between these 2 guys, it's never been climbed before. As you can see why. That is not an easy route to get up. Part of what makes this route difficult to go up in this face is that it is littered with crevices. These deep, deep caverns that just kind of burrowed out over time into the side of the mountain, but they get covered over with light snow and ice. Not thick enough to hold human weight. So as you cross over them, oftentimes you'll break through them with no awareness that you're even walking across them, and it's a bad day on the way down. So they decided not only are they going to climb, they're going to climb on a day when the weather isn't spectacular, and they're going to go up the west side. And they did it. They ended up making the climb. They summited. The problem is, by the time they got up there, the bad weather had turned into worse weather, and they were going to start racing down to beat the storm. However, this is not a mountain that you race down. So as they were making their way down too quickly, at one point, Joe Simpson took a fall and completely shattered his leg. Bad enough that he's not getting down at this point on his own. And so Yates has got a decision to make. And his decision is either I stay, we hunker down somehow in the storm, and we figure out how to get down together, or what? Sayonara. I bail on my friend and I leave him on his own. Problem is, they're still so high at this point, there's no way he's getting down alive. This is a death sentence to his friend. So what they end up doing is they end up rigging between them enough rope and line that they can get about 75 feet. And so what happens is Yates ends up wrapping the rope around him. He wraps the other end around Joe, and he just starts lowering him at certain points. The incline, he could slide at times. Then there were other places where he had to lower him over edges, but he just lowers him. And then after they got to the end of the rope, he'd climb to him. So he'd climb to him, lower him again, climb to him, lower him again. And so this went on for hours. Problem is the storm had now closed in on them because their descent is going so slow. So by the time that they would get to the ends of the rope, they couldn't see each other. And what happened, and one of the times when Joe was being lowered, is he got lowered directly across one of those covered over crevices and then crashed through it. And so up above, Yates had no idea exactly what was going on, except that as he's lowering him, at one point, clearly he knew a fall had happened because he got yanked forward so hard by the rope. But on the other end of the rope, there was no wall close by for Joe to even help with. Like, Joe Simpson was so far away from the walls that he's literally just dangling in midair, which means that weight transferred up to the top of the rope was starting to pull Simon down towards him. So even though he's got his axes dug into the ground, he's got his heels dug into the ground, he just realized at one point he's slowly getting pulled as well. And he realizes, I'm gonna go over with him eventually because I can't pull him up. Even in all of his strength, if he was fresh at the start of the day, it would have been a difficult feat to pull his friend up over that ledge, but he's not at the start of the day. He's already weathered the storm, been in the elements, they're exhausted from the summit and trying to come down, so there was no way he was pulling him back up, and he just started sliding more and more and more, and so he was left with two options. One is to continue to be pulled along with him until he's pulled over the edge and they both just plummet, or what he ended up doing, which has created one of the most criticized decisions in all of mountaineering history, is he pulled the small pocket knife out that he had access to, and he cut the line. And he sent his friend over the edge. What he did not realize is that his friend did not plummet all the way down to the bottom. He actually ended up falling a short distance and hit a ledge. His body was already broken. That didn't help. That definitely messed him up all the more, but it didn't take his life. So the storm resides, the storm's gone. His friend gets to the edge. Yates looks over, and because of the angle, he can't see Simon, so his assumption is Joe's going all the way down and he's dead. And so he hikes back to base camp with that horror on his mind that he just sent his friend over the edge. Little did he know that laying on that edge for an entire night, Joe's sitting there thinking, I got to get out of here, and what am I going to do? So he realizes a sheet of ice up both walls is not climbable. He's not getting out going up. And so there's this very sobering moment where he realized the only option he had was to actually descend deeper into the crevice. You ever been in a pit that feels like that? Like, hey, it's bad enough that I went over the edge. It's bad enough that I feel like I'm in what we've been calling the whole series, the dip. But now my only option is to feel like I have to go deeper in before maybe there's a chance of getting out. So he did begin to descend, and he went down as far as he could, and then he went down as far as he could, and then he went down as far as he could because he had a very limited amount of rope. Remember, it was 75 feet cut. And eventually he got to the bottom, and he found his way out somehow miraculously. But at that point, he was severely dehydrated. He was frostbitten in multiple places, exposure to the elements and the shattered leg. He had to drag himself across snow for many miles before he finally did emerge back at base camp. And I kid you not, it was literally almost on the heels of his friends getting on a helicopter themselves and leaving and thinking that their friend was just buried in that cave. So later on, he would tell a story about being down in that cavern, and one of the things that he shared was this. In one interview, he said, as I descended lower and deeper into the crevice, I thought to myself, this is a form of suicide. But I didn't have the courage to just jump off the ledge. What I did do, though, is I didn't put a knot at the end of my rope because I figured if I got to the end of it and there wasn't anything below me, I would just keep sliding off the rope. And I thought that'd be the quickest way to go. When he was interviewed after he had recovered from this, I watched one interview recently where somebody asked him, what did you learn from all of this? This is what he said he learned. Many things, but at the top of the list, he said, it probably doesn't need to be said, but I feel like I can't go without saying it. Humans can endure far more than anyone think is possible if they don't give up. If they don't give up. So for this series, we've been walking with Habakkuk the prophet, who has kind of flipped the script on what a prophet does. Because a prophet is supposed to take all the messages of God and deliver them to the ears of the people. But what Habakkuk has done, unique to all the other prophets, is he's taken the questions of the people, the frustrations of the people, the pain of the people, the accusations of the people, and he's taken them to the ear of God. Because Habakkuk lives in a time where his entire country is just being ravaged by other nations, by a nation that's still yet to come called the Babylonians, one of the worst empires of the day that leaves very little alive and left. Their economy is going down. Morality is decreased. Everything about Habakkuk's way of life and his people is under an era of suffering. And God seems in many ways to be distant from it, immune to it, unconcerned, like he's not doing anything. It's like he's nowhere. He's just gone MIA. And so in chapter 1 of Habakkuk, Habakkuk really goes to God with this request of like, where are you? Like, how long are you gonna let this kind of stuff happen? Like, do you not see the injustice that takes place? Do you not see the pain? And really just challenges God. In chapter 2, even begins to challenge his character and what he thought to be true about God. Like when God answers back eventually and says, Habakkuk, not only am I still here, not only am I aware of what's happening, I'm actually about to send the Babylonians in as well. And so Habakkuk's like, wait a minute, that doesn't even line up with what I think I understand about your character. How is that loving? You're gonna send in the worse people than we are. Like, what is happening? And so he goes into this literally wrestling match with God, which is reflective of his name. His name literally means to take hold of, to grapple with, to wrestle. And so he's wrestling with God. But this isn't usually what a prophet does. A prophet says, hey, I'm gonna bring you God's message. And he's like, no, God, we're kind of gonna put you on trial because you're not making sense. You don't seem to line up to the character I thought we understood about you. And so we're actually bringing complaint to your ear. And what we said all series long is that when you're in a place like this, a place of pain, a place of question, whether that pain is personal. I had somebody, even during the first service, when that video was playing, the Spafford video, texted me. I was sitting right over here and I got a text. I looked down and it was somebody sitting in the back of the room and said, today is 3 years to the day that I last heard my daughter's voice. Maybe some of you are sitting here in a similar place. Like there is just a thick, deep, painful wrestle that you have. A loss, something that doesn't make sense that God would have let you go through, or maybe you just look at the landscape of humanity and you're like, man, if there is a God, what the heck? How does he just stand by and let this happen? I mean, this is what Habakkuk is bringing to God. And we say when you're in this place, it's like you've kind of gone into this dip. Instead of your spiritual journey continue to go up and to the right, we hit these moments where it just feels like it kind of plummets down and it stalls out. We took the whole idea of the dip off of a place on the south side ascent to the summit of Mount Everest called the Hillary Step, which is this weird place where you have to kind of go up what's almost a false summit, but then go down again into one of the most difficult, some people say it is the most difficult spot on the south side attempt to summit Everest, where you go down to this very narrow ledge, all rock, you have to be roped in, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought I was almost there. And then you kind of go down before you have to make the final ascent back up to the real summit. Like there's a reality that at times we hit that kind of a place in our spiritual journey where it just kind of goes down into this dip with questions for God, with frustrations with God, with pain that we're dealing with, those moments in life where God just doesn't seem to be operating by the rules we thought he would operate by, at least not for us, not for humanity, not based on what we thought to be true about him. And one of the hardest things about being in that place is that you have to make a choice about what to do. So on your screen, we said there's a couple of options that you've got when you're in this place of a dip. For example, option number 1 is just to go back kind of to a lower summit and live more of a phony Christian religious life. You know, these are the people that walk around and everything is just always good. Like, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm good. I am blessed and highly favored. And if you say things like that, I'm not criticizing you. Like there are true things that we can say in the Bible, but there are also true things we can say from the Bible that's just a plastic attempt to ignore pain that we don't know how to deal with. So we're like, oh, I'm all good. Oh, I'm all good. Like, you got a gaping wound in your arm. I know, praise Jesus, it's all good. It's like, you need help, right? So one response, and we see this a lot, is I'm just gonna live kind of, I'm gonna go through the motions spiritually. I'm not gonna tangle with and wrestle with the difficult things of God. Just gonna kind of have more of a superficial journey. Or option 2 is walk away from the whole thing. Like, God doesn't make sense. If there really is, and he's loving, he wouldn't have allowed fill in the blank, so I'm just gonna pass. I'm done. No, thank you. Option number 3 is to recreate an easier version of God. This is where we take particularly parts of the Bible that we don't like, that don't make sense to us, parts like Habakkuk, where God says, hey, I'm gonna answer. Hey, I'm gonna show up, Habakkuk. Yeah, I've got a response to your plea. My response is, I'm gonna send the Babylonians. Like there's all kinds of attempts to say, hey, those parts of the Bible don't make sense and we don't like them and we don't like what God does in those moments, so we're just not gonna read those parts. We're just gonna ignore them. Matter of fact, let's just do away with that altogether and recreate our own version of God. I read a book that so-and-so said God's like this. I have a book that also tells what God's like. He wrote it. And so we have this tendency to say, let's just make God into our own image. Let's make God into some different kind of an image. And we oftentimes find ourselves clinging to something that isn't actually him. Or option 4, we wrestle. Is that we determine that we will wrestle with God like Habakkuk did. We'll put him on trial. We'll put him in a headlock. We'll take hold of him because he allows us to and invites us to, and we will wrestle through the pain and the difficulty. So this is what Habakkuk's doing. And truth be told, as we enter into chapter 3, very little has changed for him. I mean, he's still in pain. The suffering still exists. Things are going to get worse before they get better. But what's interesting now as we enter chapter 3 is that the thing that seems to change is him, is that he's actually changed. I want to read it for you. If you got it now, here we go, chapter 3. I'm going to go to the very end of chapter 3, and I want you to see how he concludes. Because how he concludes is where he ultimately moves to, and then we're going to kind of backtrack and build our way towards it. Verse 19. The sovereign Lord is my strength, and he makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights. Just again, look at chapter 1. Here's a difference of these two positions. Chapter 1, this is Habakkuk. God, how long must I call to help and you don't listen? Or cry to you, violence, and you don't save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing, destruction, violence, or all I see before me? There is strife and conflict, and it continues to abound. The law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so the justice is even perverted. That's chapter 1. There's a big difference between that and this. The sovereign Lord is my strength, and he makes my feet like the feet of deer, and he enables me to tread on the heights. What's changing is that somehow Habakkuk seems to have gone from trauma to trust, from accusation against God to confidence in him. And what I find interesting is that he does not say, God, because everything's gotten better, now I feel strong again. What he says is, you, O sovereign Lord, are my strength. And nothing about his situation has changed. It's only going to continue to get worse. This is so crucial to understand because we think strength with God comes when situations get better. Oh man, I feel so much better now and so much stronger now because the situation has changed. And Habakkuk says, nope, situation's still the same. I'm changing. Sovereign God, you have my trust. But then he goes on and he says this, which I think actually gives us the mystery of what hope looks like. He says, you make my feet like the feet of a deer and enable me to tread on the heights. All right, what the heck does that mean? Like, could we just close this and go home now? Everybody's like, oh, there's the answer to hope. We have little deer feet. Like, what does that even mean? Like, here's your answer to hope. Look at your feet. Oh, they're like little deer feet. Well, here's what it means. You have to understand a little bit of the animal kingdom and understand the mystery that I think God is putting in here and the reality that what God has created in all of creation speaks to other parts of creation. For example, did you know that deer are some of the only animals who can place their back feet exactly where their front feet have been? In other words, they don't have to have at all times 4 individual different points of contact as they walk. They can put their front feet and back feet into the same place as they walk. Here's what's important about that. It means that they need less stable ground to walk on than other animals that need 4 points of contact all the time when they walk. It means that the ground can be less stable, less flat, less certain. It means that they can walk where other animals can't walk with a certain stability because they can put their back feet where their front feet are. When God says, I have given you the feet of a deer, what he is saying is, here's what hope does. Hope gives you the ability to stand and to walk even when the ground underneath you is shaking and unstable. There is a very true reality that hope is not an idea that's just ethereal. It's not just a religious concept. Hope is something that actually changes us and changes us as we go through the situations of life. And God says, hey, see how the deer, see how I make them walk? And see that the way they walk, they actually can traverse through pretty rocky ground and unstable ground. I've actually made you to do that. That's what my hope can accomplish for you. But did you also know that deer are some of the sneakiest animals? Like they are stealth. Any hunters? When I first started hunting, I'll never forget a guy telling me, hey, do you know how you hear a deer in the woods? I was like, how? He's like, you don't. It's like, oh. He's like, this is what he says to me. I love this. I've tried to pass this on to my son over the years. He says, if you hear a deer in the woods, you didn't hear a deer. You heard a squirrel. Right? I mean, how many of you would even admit there was a time where you were sitting in a stand or a blind and you dozed off for a minute and woke back up and there's like one right in front of you? You're like, where the heck did that come from? Anybody gonna be honest? You missed one because it was right in front of you? Yeah. Some of you, you're in church, stop lying. They sneak, they're sneaky. They're some of the most graceful, peaceful walking animals that you'll ever see. Here's part of what I think God is saying as he compares us and what we can have in hope to the deer and how they're made and how they walk and how they traverse. As he is saying, here's what my hope does, is it creates a peace within you that lets you walk through the worst of situations with a calmness, with a quietness. So much so that this is what I would say about hope. It gives you an internal peace even while hell is breaking loose all around you externally. It's what even another place in the Bible says when it says that there is a peace that surpasses understanding. Not peace that makes sense because you read a book. Not peace that makes sense because you went to church enough. Not peace that makes sense because you memorized even a verse at times. Like, can all of that play into it? Yeah, sure. But there's a peace that you can't make sense of. Not, well, I know I have peace because no. There's actually a peace that you can have that even you would say, I don't know why. I don't know why I feel this peace right now, but I do. That's part of the hope. That I think even as God compares it to this animal analogy, he's saying is I give this hope that transcends anything you go through, that even while the raging storm is happening, there's a calmness inside you. And then he says about the deer at the end, he says, he enables me to tread on the heights. Do you know that a typical deer is anywhere between 100 and 150 pounds, and they can jump 7 or more feet high? There's even record I read recently of a deer that was being pursued by coyotes that jumped over a barrier 15 feet tall. Like, that's a big animal to jump that high. Anybody in here jump 15 feet tall? Right? But what he's saying is, listen, I have given you the ability with hope, with my hope that is a real hope. It does real things. It's not just a concept, it actually does things. I've given you the ability in my hope to have yourself lifted above any situation you're in, even while you go through it, to be lifted above it. Especially when it feels like the predators are closing in. Hope gives you the ability to go even higher. So the question is, then how do we have this kind of hope? Because if Habakkuk is the one that's changing, even while the circumstances are staying the same, how do we have that kind of hope that goes from despair to trust, from accusation to confidence in God? Because I think there are some things that we can do that begin to trigger that hope into a reality in our life. Things that we even see Habakkuk doing in this passage. For example, the first thing that I think we see Habakkuk doing is, I'm gonna give this one to you, stay with me because it's gonna sound weird when I say it, but we weaponize worship. Here's what I mean. Chapter 3, verse 1. A prayer of Habakkuk the prophet on the Shigionoth. It's a Hebrew term. Everybody say it. It's a fun word. Say Shigionoth. Shigionoth. You're like, what does Shigionoth mean? No idea, actually. Scholars don't really know. It's a term that can mean a couple of different things. It could maybe mean an instrument. Fewer people think that. It could be some kind of way to record music, to ascribe music down. There's not an agreed upon understanding of what it means except in this way. Somehow it relates to music, which would make sense because the historical belief of Habakkuk, that before he was a prophet, he was actually a temple musician. And so he has a history with music. And so there's this idea that right away in chapter 3, before he gets to the you are my sovereign trust and hope, is that he goes to God for a third time, but this time he goes to him with some form of song, with some kind of music, whether it's an instrument or lyrics, or whether he's literally singing out to God, is that somehow what he's doing in this moment is he is bringing song to God. That's exactly what Horatio Spafford did. Is he was bringing music to the moment of pain. He was putting words from the deeper parts of our soul, because you know this, like there are just words, there are concepts, there are emotions that lyrics have the ability of a song to get to in our soul that for some reason other things don't. just verbally communicating don't sometimes, right? You guys have seen the ads, right? For like, write her a personalized song just for her, right? Why? Why is that a thing? It's not like, hey, make her a dance. Like, I don't see that offer. I don't see that advertisement. Make her a mime thing. Why? Make her a song. Why? Because music has the ability to penetrate to the deeper parts of our soul and access feelings and access emotions that so many other things don't. Which is why I think even Spafford sat there and he began to write. As his soul poured out, he wrote a song to God. He literally created, in essence, a weapon against his pain with his words turned into a melody. And you might go, well, I don't sing really good, and I certainly don't write music. I tried once and it wasn't good. Okay, well, that's why it's a really good thing that we don't live in Spafford's time. We live in this time where there are a lot of musical artists who have done that for us. And we get the advantage of using those words, using those songs. Whether it's songs like It Is Well and letting those words wash over us, or even one of the famous ones that we sing all the time, I Raise a Hallelujah. You should look up the backstory to this at one point. It was just like Spafford's moment of pain. It was born out of that these words came. I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah louder than my unbelief. I raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah because heaven comes to fight for me, so I'm gonna sing. And I'm gonna sing in the middle of my storm, louder and louder, and you're gonna hear me roar. Up from the ashes, my hope will arise because death is defeated and my king is alive. This is what I think we do in part in moments we're saying, how do I activate hope? Is that you let worship become a weapon. Why? Because when you sing words that are true about the character, the goodness, the nature, the reality, the existence of God over your situations, when you let the music play over your situations, it changes something in you, even if it doesn't change the situation. And I think that's exactly what's happening with Habakkuk. Why do you think even in the Bible it says that in heaven right now, there are beings, angels and other beings. You know what they're doing to God? They're singing to him. It doesn't say that they're reading poetry to him. It doesn't say that they're doing interpretive dances for him. It says they're singing to him. I'm just telling you, one way to activate hope is in the moments of despair, is that we let the music that lifts up the truth of who he is wash over you, and it penetrates to your soul. Here's the second thing that I think we do, is we're intentional about what songs that we sing. And what does Habakkuk sing? If you go back to the text, you'll see it. It says, verse 2, Lord, I have heard of your fame, and I stand in awe of your deeds. So Lord, please repeat them in this day. In our time, make them known. In your wrath, remember mercy. For God, you came from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. His glory covered the heavens, and his praise filled the earth. His splendor was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand, where his power had been hidden. Plague went before him, and pestilence followed in his steps. He stood and shook in the earth, and he looked, and he made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains, they crumbled, and the age-old hills collapsed. But he marched on forever. You know, part of what he's doing here is he's remembering back to things that God had previously done. For example, plagues went before him. When did God send plagues before him? When he rescued the Hebrew people from the Egyptians. So part of what Habakkuk is doing in this moment is he's remembering back to things God has done in the past. Here's the second thing we do, I think, that helps activate real, genuine hope, is we remember when. When what? When God has been present for you. And you go, even if you've started the journey and you're like really new in the journey with God, then go back to the very first moment. But you go back to the moments that God has been faithful and demonstrated his faithfulness. So you go, I remember when, because that's what Habakkuk's doing. He goes, I remember when, even though I don't see it now, so I know you can because I know that you have, so please do it again. Like, if you ever made that prayer to God, like, call him to action because you know what he's done before, or have the confidence in his future faithfulness because you can look to his past faithfulness. Like, if you went and climbed Everest, I'm just gonna bet you're probably gonna take a souvenir, maybe even a rock. Like, you're gonna take a piece of that mountain to say, been there, done that. How have you done that spiritually? Because I think it's just as important spiritually to have something to look back at times where we're wondering, where is God faithful? And go, oh yeah, he is. All through the Old Testament, this is what they did. They built altars. Every time God showed up and did something to save his people, rescue his people, provide for his people, there was a moment where altars were built, and those altars were a place of sacrifice and worship, but they were also a place of remembrance, where later on, in another dip moment, they could look back and go, man, is God gonna come through? He has before. And I can trust his current faithfulness because I can see his past faithfulness. We are forgetful people. And for me, it's like no matter how many times God shows up, I just continue to forget it in the future. And so I have different methods. I write things down. I write all the time in my Bible, things that God has done, things he's showed me, prayers that I believe he's answered. I've kept journals before. I mean, it's not one certain thing, but there are ways that I think we need to get better at recording the moments of God's faithfulness in our life so that we can look at those times. We can remember when we're in the next dip, that God has proved himself faithful in the past and have confidence that he will do it again in the future. And then the last one I'll just give you is this. I think one more way for us to activate faith is that we have to stand our ground. When you're hiking or you're on any kind of an adventure, Everest, out in the wilderness, if you get yourself lost and you have no idea where you are or where to go, what's the best rule? Stay put. Yeah, somebody will find you, stay put. You know, even Simon and Joe told the story later on that part of their mistake when they first went up to Sur le Grand is that they didn't take all of the resources they needed, particularly all of their survival resources. So they didn't take extra food, extra water, a backpack with a sleeping bag in it, a tent in it. And so what happened is when they got in that storm initially, they thought, we got to get down quickly. The storm was bad, but it was survivable, and had they had the right gear, they could have stood their ground and let it pass and then safely descended. The problem was they were forced, because of their poor planning, they were forced to move when they should have stayed still. When you and I are in a place of pain, when we're in a place of loss, confusion, frustration with God, we start flailing all around, don't we? Like we flail emotionally, we flail religiously, we flail relationally, where we just get frustrated, we start blaming, we start trying to rationalize, we start to understand, and it's just like literally, like even sometimes like physically, we go nuts, we just go crazy, and we're just in this place of kind of spiraling out of control. Think like the difference between the two reactions to a bumblebee, right? You got one reaction, right? And you're the person that's like, just don't move. But what do most of us do? We flail, right? Like it drives me nuts all the time. This is us at home. Bees in our backyard, and I'm like, be still. And my wife is like, oh. Sorry, I did not get permission for that, but that is literally how you sound. And I'm like, babe, stay still. Just stay. It's gonna sting me. Yes, now it is because you're making it angry. But this is what we do. When we're in a place of panic, when we're in a place of frustration, we just have a tendency to start flailing all over the place. Like my son who recently got in a car accident, I showed up at the scene and he's like running around his car. He's like, Dad, I can't even believe it. I'm like, well, what happened? He's like, I had a sandwich and I hit the brakes and the brake lights and the sandwich went flying. And I bent down and looked up and bam. And I was like, oh man, I hope that was a good sandwich at least. The heck, dude? But he's just like panicking and flailing. And like, have you ever caught yourself in a moment in the pit? Like you just flail. Bring it in. I think part of what we have to do to trigger a real sense of hope is to stand our ground on confidence that no matter what happens, our God is for us. This is how Habakkuk concludes before he got to you make my feet like deer. He says, God, I have heard and my head is pounding. My lips are even quivering at the sound. For decay has crept into my bones and my legs tremble. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come, of the nations that are invading us. Watch this. Though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vine, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord, and I will be joyful in God my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength, and he makes my feet like the feet of a deer and enables me to tread on the heights. Everything that preceded him saying, I trust you, you make me to tread on the heights, was even if it all fails. Listen to him. He's like, though the fig tree doesn't bud, though the crops all fail, though the cattle aren't in the sheep pen, what he's saying is, though it's gonna get worse, though everything is crumbling, though my whole life feels like it's falling apart, though the horizon looks like it's gonna get worse, yet will I trust you because you are for me. And I will camp on that. I will not flail. I will not flee. I will not run. I will stand my ground in absolute confidence that though the world shakes, my God does not. And he is for me. That's where he stood his ground. And that's how he stood his ground. We have a tendency in our pursuit of God and in our worship of God sometimes to make it very me-centric, very narcissistic. God, I will worship you and I will trust you and I will follow you if you give me what I want, if the pain goes away. But this type of worship of God that Habakkuk is doing is defiant in the face of pain. It is defiant to say, no matter what comes, I will stand my ground on the deepest of convictions, even if it costs me everything, that my God is for me and I will trust him. And you in that place will have an experience with God that will allow you to ignore every voice that would say otherwise, even your own. Even if your own voice says this is ridiculous, your family says it's ridiculous, your friends say bail on him, your own logic says this doesn't make sense, if you stand your ground in confidence, you will have a hope that will transcend anything you go through, so that even if your circumstances aren't well, your soul can be. So I want you to watch for a minute a video of one of our very own here. Now, when we show videos, usually we have a rule, which is we don't show videos of the lives of anybody on stage because it's not about us. But we had an opportunity actually to share a story of Chris Cook, who you usually see behind the piano, and the journey he's gone through over the last number of years that's been just this journey, where he found himself up and to the right with God and then in a pit that only kept getting deeper, and yet learned how in all of that, at the end of it, to conclude, though my circumstances aren't well, it is well with my soul.
I vaguely remember what life was like before it happened. We were so young. My parents sacrificed so much for us to have meaningful education, but also really prioritized our emotional well-being, our spiritual growth. From as long as I can remember, it was just a very, very safe, loving home environment to be in. And so when it happened, chaos just ensued. It was Monday, September 26th, 1994. We got in the car and I remember my mom turning around and saying, guys, mom has cancer. And so that night we got home and I'll never forget the four of us kneeling on our camelback couch in the living room, sobbing before the Lord. You know, the household income got cut in half, but the bills tripled. And so for as long as I can remember, my dad worked 3, if not 4 jobs. We stepped into more of a caretaker type role alongside our dad. That's when things got really scary and really bad. I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy some of the things I had to see. Every time the phone rang, it was the doctor saying, it's an emergency, you gotta get to the hospital. By 2011, it was a Thursday night, she was screaming in pain. She had a tumor the size of a softball on her spine and couldn't move. We had to call an ambulance. And I'll never forget the image in my mind of paramedics putting my mom on a stretcher and wheeling her out of the house, and it's snowing. And in haste, my dad was just trying to get things together. He slipped down the stairs and broke his ankle while they're trying to get her to the hospital. And they went a few different routes in terms of chemotherapy, but it came to a place where they could do no more. In mid-October of 2012, a decision was made by the doctors that because they couldn't do anything more, they needed to put her on hospice. Because she became belligerent and her personality changed and I lost my mom before I lost my mom. I hated that time. I have just the worst memories about that season of my life, and that continued for 6 weeks. You know, she was in a comatose state, and I kissed her on the cheek, and I said, "Mama, do you know what today is?" And she just shook her head. No, I said, "It's my birthday." I said, "Do you know how old I am?" She said, 135. She wasn't trying to be cute. And I just remember leaving her bedroom and going to the bathroom sink and splashing my face with cool water. Tears just ran down my face. Well, just seconds later, my sister Carmen said, "You got to get in here. You got to help me." I don't know, what are the bags that was holding blood broke. And so here I am on my birthday, hands and knees, and wiping up bodily fluids and blood. Wednesday, November 21st, 2012, at about 11:40 in the morning, the phone rang. I was at my desk in my office. Carmen said, "Get home, Mom, stop breathing." I mean, and like that, it was over. And I remember driving home the 2.5 miles that it took me, raced up to her bedroom, and she was gone. I didn't get to say goodbye to her. That was devastating. It is devastating. I miss her so much. Thanksgiving was the day after she died, and then Christmas just happened, and that was a blur. It was a very just quiet day at home. And by the spring, I'm like, okay, I'm breathing. And then the summer of 2013, an absolute tsunami hit me out of the blue. And here I am in a neurologist's office following an MRI of my brain, being told I have mild but manageable relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. The level of trauma from Mom's situation crept up on me. I went into full-blown panic. I was having 22 severe panic attacks every single day. I created a very safe, small, stuck life. I didn't go anywhere 2 miles outside of my home. I had never felt a weight of depression and hopelessness upon my soul like that ever. I began to spiral. Fear and panic took over my whole life. And it really crescendoed to Christmas of 2013. This was probably the lowest point for me because I wasn't sure if I wanted to live. I felt betrayed. I felt abandoned for the kid who lived life with such hope and such curiosity. Both of those qualities were gone. And the feelings of betrayal and abandonment, if I'm honest, by the Lord himself, were real. I mean, I told him, it looks like you just betrayed me. I've served you my whole life. I really do believe we all will come to this place where the Lord asks us this question: what do you want me to do for you? And therein is an invitation to pursue him, to learn more of his heart, his ways, his nature. Why things happen the way they do in life, I don't know. But I am unmoved from the fact that he is a faithful, faithful Father. I am unmoved on the fact that he is eternally good. I have a lot of scars. Scars are nothing to be ashamed of. Scars tell a story of his healing hand. So in Jesus' name, may we all go forward with boldness and confidence to run into his presence, assured that he is who he said he is.
It is well.
told you this series wasn't going to put God in a nice, neat, tidy little box that made sense of him. And it wasn't going to give us easy steps. Just do these 3 things and you're out of the dip. But it does have the potential to give you God. I don't know what's in front of me this year, and I don't know what's in front of you. I don't know what this year holds for us, but I do know who holds our year. His name is Jesus. He's the author of all things. He knows everything about you. He knows every pain. He knows every dream. He knows every hope. He knows every anger you have at him. He knows it all, and it decreases nothing about how he feels about you. He's wild about you. And I wish I had an answer for all the dips that we enter into. I wish I had an answer for the things he lets happen. I wish I had an answer for the things that he doesn't do. I don't have an answer for any of that. But I do have this answer. There is a God. His name is Jesus Christ. He is not distant or absent or removed from your life or this world, and he is wildly passionate about you. And though the earth may shake, he will be present to you. And he will give you true hope if you lean into him, that though your circumstances may not be well, your soul can be. We thought that the way to end this morning, rather than just rushing out into our week, is to really sit in a place of prayer. So here's what we want to do. In the back of this room, in 3 different spots, on the left side, in the middle, and on the right, are tables with prayer prompts related to every week of the series. So stacks of paper that give you ways to pray if you feel like you're in week 1. God, where the heck are you? Other ways to pray if you feel like you're in week 2. Like, how long, God, are you going to let this go on? And then other ways to pray for week 3. Like, God, help me have the true hope that you provide. And then there's even a prayer prompt to pray for other people. Like, how do you pray for others that may be going through their own struggle right now? So I'd love to invite you, as you walk out right now, we're gonna have a prayer team up front. If we can pray for you, let us do that. But if you would visit one of those tables, grab one of those stacks of paper, like one sheet of paper from one category, or grab them all from all 4 of them, and maybe just take them and go, or maybe you even just need to stay back there for a minute and have a moment with God before you leave and go into the rest of your week. But let's not just walk out the doors before we resolve ourselves to be people that say, I will take hold of the God who longs to take hold of me. So glad you're with us this morning, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Elizabeth, what'd you
Yeah.
think today?
I thought it was just a beautiful and somber way to end the series, you know, talking about what it looks like to have hope, you know, despite all the struggles that we have.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It is well with my soul. That got me.
Yeah.
That like, whew. Yeah, it was an amazing, amazing day. And as Craig kind of closed things out, I know he talked about the prayer prompts that we had for those that are in the room with us today. We're going to post those to our Facebook group. So make sure to check those out. We'll get those up hopefully later today. So we'd love for you to partner with us and be praying over those things this week as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And reminder, if you've got a middle schooler, it's not too late to register for our all-nighter this weekend.
Yes, all night long.
Yeah.
Crazy. Have a great week, everybody.
See ya.